Hey guys, welcome to another video. Have you ever had an idea that you thought was pretty cool, but then when you tried to implement it, the limitations of the RMS engine uh, made your life difficult and made you want to give up? That's kind of an idea that I had going on for me in this map here. So basically this is just a nomad map, and the theme is that we get a bunch of villagers, scattered around here. In addition to that, we have a couple of trade carts. So these trade carts I wanted to serve sort of a dual purpose. So if you'll notice, there are these neutral markets in opposite corners of the map, and so the trade carts could potentially be used for that. But the interesting thing that I wanted to try was that if the player was in a pinch and they needed food, that we could bring this buffalo cart to the town center and we could basically eat the buffalo for food. So I think to myself, okay, that doesn't sound very difficult. It just needs a few effect amounts. So if I say, I know I have the cart here, and so I say effect amount I set the dead ID to, I think it's 1142 is a water buffalo. And if I say set the attribute of a DLC water buffalo, set its hit points to 0, that should make it so that when I delete the cart, that a water buffalo will spawn and it will die instantly. And you can see that when I, delete the cart, that's exactly what happens. The cart goes away, but I still can harvest the buffalo, which is exactly what I was planning on doing. Now, even though this worked, it does come with some other problems. So for one, I only want the starting trade carts to turn into buffaloes when they die. I don't want to have trade carts that I create later on to turn into buffaloes when they die. And the other problem is the fact that I'm a civilization whose trade carts are pulled by buffaloes is just kind of a coincidence. There are other civs in the game whose trade carts will be pulled by some other kind of animal. And it would be weird, like in this case, for a camel to die and turn into a buffalo instead for us to harvest. So what I think to do in this case is I can, instead of us having our cart as a player object, I can say set Gaia object only. And what I can do is I can set Gaia civilization. So 6 is Chinese, so basically when all of the Gaia trade carts spawn, they will all be in the Asian theme, and so they will all be pulled by buffaloes. And in addition to that, instead of just saying set attribute, I can change this to Gaia set attribute, so that in this case only the Gaia carts will be affected, and that any trade carts that we create later on in the game won't have these effects applied to it and turn into buffaloes when they die. So if we look around, we can see that all of the carts now are going to be pulled by buffaloes, which is in a sense good, but we can see that if we happen to capture one of these trade carts and delete it, that it just dies. It doesn't turn into a buffalo like I told it to do last time. And that has to do with one of the limitations of RMS effects, is that when we set Gaia civilization, we lose the ability to apply effects to classes of objects for Gaia that players are also able to control. So for example, our trade cart here is a class of object that a player is able to control. So when we try to modify the attributes of said object, it will not apply to Gaia. But we know that despite this being a limitation for RMS effects, we know that we've seen in previous videos that if we simply apply those same kind of effects in an XS script and attach that to the RMS, that we should be able to apply these effects circumventing that limitation. So this rule here that I put in the XS just basically, sets the dead ID and sets the hit points just like we were trying to do over here. So instead of relying on our RMS effects, we will try to include the XS and see if those effects work. So I can try to walk up to this water buffalo cart and I can delete it. And we can see that just like the first time we tried, it successfully turns into a water buffalo when it dies. So that's helpful. But the intention of this map was to have the trade carts in control of the player from the start of the game. And with the method that we're using, by using them as Gaia objects, that's not going to be the case currently. So the next step that I tried was finding a way to convert those Gaia trade carts to the player immediately upon starting the game. So if you'll notice that when we're making the cart has an actor area around it. So if I say flare, which is a temporary revealer 112, and I say create a bunch of objects, a lot of objects, set place for every player, and I say actor area to place in is number 3. Basically what this is going to do is going to create some temporary visibility for every player around their respective carts to attempt to convert it at the start of the game. So we can see that those flares we put on our map were successfully able to convert the trade carts under our control at the start of the game. But then when we delete the trade cart, the dead unit is no longer a buffalo. And that bit is quite annoying because we just saw like 2 seconds ago that when we, capture the trade cart after the game starts, that the XS script was successfully able to change that dead ID. But it seems that when we capture that trade cart right away, the XS doesn't have time to set the dead ID before the player is converting it. So we need to find a way to automatically convert our trade carts under our control, but only after a certain amount of time has passed, so this XS has time to kick in before we capture those trade carts. So what I want to do now is I'm not going to create flares right away. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to make use of the dead fish trap, which is object 278. So I'll declare that up top. $278. So instead of creating flares right away, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create those dead fish traps. Now, if you watched the summary of special objects, you know that a dead fish trap normally lasts for 60 seconds. And after 60 seconds, it just goes away. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an attribute resource delta -59. So in this case, the dead fish trap should only last for 1 second before it dies. And what I'm going to do after it dies is I'm going to set its dead ID to a flare or a temporary revealer. So set the dead fish trap's dead ID to 112. So initially, the dead fish trap will spawn around the trade cart and have no line of sight, but after 1 second has passed by, the dead fish trap will go away and it will turn into this temporary revealer, which does have a line of sight, and hopefully this should capture the trade cart after the XS has kicked in and set the appropriate dead ID. Okay, so at time 0 seconds, we look around, and we do not see our, trade carts captured. And then after 1 second has passed, we can see that they show up on the mini map, and we can see that after we delete them, we can see that the XS has had enough time to apply those effects to successfully set the dead ID to a water buffalo. So I don't know about you guys, but I found this example to be pretty fascinating in the sense of how many steps it took and how many little tidbits of knowledge it took to, create an effect that's relatively simple at first glance. But at the same time, it kind of sheds light on the possibilities of, scripting in general and how we can overcome limitations that we may face by thinking outside of the box. So, thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you next time.